Welcome back to another 007 Intel podcast. Today's topic is what to look for in a private investigator. In this episode, Evan and I explore what clients should look for when hiring a private investigator on freelance platforms. Evan, what do you have to say about this?
Well, freelance platforms have become very popular in recent times, and it seems like we are needing the services of private investigators more and more these days, whether it's a due diligence review or a legal matter that's being adjudicated. But so it's come more to light in what should someone look for and what should they insist upon when it comes to hiring a private investigator.
Well, I would say first and foremost, I want to know if you're licensed. Okay.
Absolutely. A licensed private investigator is the only type that you should be using. And when we say licensed, we mean through their state board or another governing body of some kind, that they have a license that is current. It's not expired. They have a license that is of a level and of a type that is appropriate for the work that you need done, and that it's a recognized organization that issues these licenses.
Without a doubt, Evan. Another thing I do want to add to is I know that Texas, where we have our license issued by a regulatory board that oversees, there's a lot of oversight in our business, that one of the requirements is anytime that we're advertising online, you must place your license number on any type of advertisement or any marketing and such, for many reasons. I mean, obviously transparency is one, but consider some of the states that don't require licensure. So let's say you happen to live in one of those odd states, which personally I don't agree with. I think that there needs to be a regulatory board overseeing this type of service because you're handling confidential data, people's data. It's a bigger deal than what most people give it. So if I'm in a state that doesn't require a license, which again, there's a lot of problems with that, what should I look for?
Well, in those states, and there are some that don't require a license or that have very light requirements for a license. So what you need to be looking for is, I think first and foremost, once the license issue is settled, is experience. What have the members of this firm done in the past? And there should be a transparency to that, as you mentioned, to license numbers and whatever.
And actually, the license number, and I would expect to see the lead investigator's first and last name, not like an intern, not like somebody who's just decided one day they want to be a private investigator and use that term loosely and happen to be maybe a mentee, or is that under some firm, but you're going to want to see a first and last name of somebody in the organization, I would imagine. And I'm not seeing a lot of that on.
No, and the phrase you mentioned, private investigator, it's a highly regulated industry, but that's not a highly regulated phrase. People tend to use it when they're referring to someone who is not a licensed private investigator. They may be a researcher, or they may have no skills whatsoever other than some internet, searching skills, and they use that term. And that's one thing that it does go, as you mentioned, state by state, and so you have to be careful how the term is used when you see it written. You need to check up on it.
Yeah, well, so there's a couple of things I want to mention about the term private investigator, just like a Merriam-Webster classical definition of what a PI is, or private investigator, PI. I'm just going to say a PI is any person not a member of a police force. Now, this is not to say that they're, not ex-law enforcement, but not currently a member of a police force who is licensed to do detective work, such as an investigation of suspected wrongdoing or searching for missing persons. Now, this is the classical Merriam-Webster definition of a private investigator. The problem is you're seeing a lot of, and I'm seeing like a lot of these young kids who, just maybe 21, 22 years of age, think they're a big shot because they just got a bachelor's degree and maybe they have a talent, let's say, in cybersecurity or something. They can use their skill sets in cyber stuff to find people's information, but they sure as heck have never served a day in military or law enforcement. So, I mean, you're not looking at somebody with 30 plus years experience. I'm talking about just one person, somebody like you or Rick or Mario, some of the people who, are near and dear to you who have worked in federal law enforcement. So people on certain platforms recognize that the term private investigator is a high hit keyword. So they're thinking, ooh, OSINT researcher isn't going to get me business. So let me go ahead and grift off of this one phrase or this one keyword, which undermines those men and women who are former law enforcement, who paid their dues, earned their stripes, and have decades of experience that, I would say allows them to in such a way where they deserve to have that title,
and those are the people that will accomplish what the client needs.
Well, no,
and successfully and effectively. Yeah,
no doubt, because you work decades in a field.
Mm-hmm.
You know how to approach various situations, and even more complex ones. And someone who is licensed and is fully, insured, bonded, has the business LLC, the corporate documents, they're not going to use like these Mickey Mouse, databases, these people finder sites. They're going to have a tier 1 police grade database that can get like real-time address, phone information and such.
And states like Texas and the other large states, but then not all of them, in order to get a license, you have to have all of those things. You have to be bonded, insured. You have to have a number of years of experience. You have to, pass a background check
with FBI fingerprints
and all of those things. And so, a lot goes with just saying a license. It's not a registration. It is an actual license, and typically you're incorporated, and it is also a professional firm as well as a collection of experienced, knowledgeable, competent investigators.
And not only that too is you're keeping up with, of course, the administrative fees, but you're also under governmental oversight. So there may be a time when someone knocks on your door. It could be the Department of Public Safety wanting to do an audit. Okay, so how are you storing the data that you search? What types, they may just do this randomly, especially
they do.
They do. And especially in cases where someone who isn't licensed, is on a platform, it's easy to find out who these people are in real life. And that's, if you're not licensed in a state requiring licensure, it doesn't matter where you may be. Even if you say, well, I spend most of my time in a state like Colorado, but then I'm also in this state, it doesn't matter. Now you're looking at 2 states who might be like, hey, wait a second. I don't think, go ahead.
Well, and that if someone is not licensed, they've never been audited, for example, or examined by the governing board.
Well, yeah, I can give you a classical example. There was a time not long ago when a PI firm, I was reading this in the paper. This was not actually in the state of Texas, but it was in a state, I'm trying to remember what the name of the state was. But somebody, the licensure was a requirement in this particular state. and this person who was on a freelance platform was, calling themselves using the term private investigator, saying, well, I'm conducting an investigative type of work privately, therefore I'm a private investigator. It's like, no, 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 no. You've got it backwards, truly. This person was probably likely an online open source intelligence researcher, but figured, well, no one's going to Google, hey, I want to hire an OSINT researcher. I'm going to, so they picked up on that, but they got into a lot of trouble in terms of possible jail time, fines, and the list goes on. But I digress, Evan. I'm not going to go down, that story and rabbit hole.
Yeah, those are the things that happen in in this industry. But you were mentioning handling of data. Besides the experience of handling it, it's often, if not always, confidential data. You want people handling your data that are accustomed to being custodians of sensitive data, people that have had clearances in the past for years, people who are familiar with what can and can't be done, and are careful with the storage and archiving and the use of data where it's not put at risk, which can be the case with, as you mentioned, someone just starting out in their early 20s without a lot of experience or any experience. They may not be as knowledgeable about handling your data.
Absolutely. And that's something that really concerns me is there's no doubt that some of these young, I call them kids because they're like in their early 20s. It seems like yesterday I was in my early 20s, but that's not the case anymore. But no doubt that these, newbies, I mean, there are clearly very intelligent individuals, but at the same time, I think that experience over the course of many years would reveal much to them. It would give them a lot of wisdom, and it would humble them, frankly, I think.
Sure.
And I think that there needs to be more humility in this type of industry because, people say, I'm a private investigator, and then they get a chip on their shoulder and think that, I can do X, Y, and Z. I can run all these investigations. And it's like, wait a second. Even having a few years in law enforcement, wait, stop right where you are, because you cannot assist this client with this type of investigation because of X, Y, and Z. This could break so many laws, and it could compromise so much. So it's having, sort of the experiential, but also administrative knowledge of, why or why not. And the experience might suggest that if you were to give somebody carelessly data, this might result in the homicide of a woman who was trying to flee and escape from this predator. But the inexperienced PI said, oh, I want to make $30-$40 or $100 just giving out an address. And it's like, did you ask the right questions? Did you really? But I don't know.
Did you handle that data appropriately and
right.
and disseminate it appropriately? There are, with experience comes familiarity with, the Bank Secrecy Act and with HIPAA and with all of these things that come into play when it comes to handling data.
We had someone earlier today say, hey, I want the social security number of a judge. I said, Evan, get back, get into the office now. What the heck is this? Evan's like, no. No. But this guy, what freaked me out was this guy said, oh, disregard. I found somebody else to do it. And I told Evan, you got to let this guy know that whoever, I think the guy got spooked because it took us a few hours to respond because we weren't in the office. But I said, Evan, did you see this? Evan's like, yeah, this is a problem. Like, yeah, this is a huge problem. And the guy said, oh, disregard 007. I found someone to get me the judge's social security number. I'm curious if the guy was being honest who the heck was this person? Because boy, oh boy,
That's the scary part, is
it's
if
terrifying.
he really found someone that would do that, the chances are very good that it's not a licensed private investigator,
Oh.
because they would know that that is not something that you can do. The unmasking of full social security numbers is
Oh, that
highly restricted.
terrifies
And
me.
just the thought of who it was that they got to do that is exactly what we're talking about on this podcast, is the proof of why this is important.
And let me say this one thing, Evan. If somebody did, in fact, provide a judge's social security number, there would be many ways of going back and finding out the database, the Tier 1 database, and the source, like the account number associated with that search.
Absolutely.
So if there was, in fact, a PI who did look up that information and provide that and disseminate that carelessly because they cared more about their bottom line than protecting a judge, which there are certain rules with the judges. There's legislation that says you cannot disseminate a judge's information because of, well, especially when it comes to instances where they're overseeing like a murder trial or a big narco case. I mean, there are levels of protection there, but if the PI who allegedly gave an SSN of a judge out, listen very carefully, they will find you.
Oh yeah, and that's the sort of thing, licensed or not, when they follow that trail, because there will be investigators. If anything were to
There's
happen,
always a trail.
there will be individuals who will investigate that, and they will certainly be able to trace all of the communications, including they will probably end up seeing ours where we declined to do that, and warned the individual that that would be something that no legitimate PI would do or should do for them.
In rare instances, let's say someone approached us and said, Evan and Sarah, I am in a divorce proceeding. Let me provide you with all the documents. Here's my marriage certificate. Here's my driver's license. Here's X, Y, and Z. I am legitimately married to this guy. I have the last four of his social. You can see I've got even his birth certificate, but they provide enough evidence. There's an attorney involved. In that situation, we would consult with each other and maybe the regulatory board to say, hey, we're just checking, would this be an instance where this is appropriate? So we want to make sure before we disseminate something like that so carelessly, like some people may, we want to make sure that we're very careful, not careless, and truly, really consult, even though we know, yes, okay, this person has maybe wanted to provide all this documentation. It would be almost near impossible. But then, because this is an online platform, you want to make sure that where did they retrieve this information from the get-go? They could have just been some person overseas who hacked into somebody's computer or system and retrieved these documents, but they're wanting desperately the social security number. So it may be a call to an attorney, a legitimate law office, after you've spoken with a regulatory board who issued your license, to say, yes, this is okay. You can, in this instance, especially if you're talking to a lawyer and there's legal documents. So in those situations, maybe we can, but we're so careful.
And in speaking about the individual that this person ended up going with, that people quite often decide on an investigator not by how careful they are handling data, how licensed, how experienced they are, but they go just based on the price.
This is what disturbs me with a lot of freelance platforms, is that because certain, and I'm not going to name any names here, certain freelance platforms don't do their due diligence in screening those making claims of or using the term private investigator in a title. The problem is, you see, with this one particular freelance platform, there was a damning Vice article that really just completely tore them a new one because they weren't carefully reviewing the advertisements of alleged private investigators, and this was compromising the safety of consumers and private individuals unbeknownst to them. And I mean, I'm talking about hacking, offering I will give you a surveillance tracker, and then not even showing any proof or indication that they were in fact licensed. And so pricing is not always indicative of a good PI. This could be someone who's priced very high, or those who are I said prost. Priced
very low.
Very low. And I'll give you an example. I've seen on this one particular platform some exceptional young men who are indeed legitimately licensed. One is out in Florida, a Vietnamese brother. I know because I have a lot of dear friends with the same last name. He looks legit. I'm like, awesome, bro. God bless you for being licensed and going through that procedure. He's priced a little high, but you know what? He understands, like, I don't want to mess with anything under this price. Great. Now, there are others who do not demonstrate licensure and are starting out brand new sellers, like higher than I think our lowest whatever gig. And I think when we started on that platform, we agreed that we're not going to take a profit. This is almost like pro bono. We'll break even at first, so we can get some glowing reviews. Like, I mean, we're both business 101 when it comes to, building successful businesses. And there are some who are priced it's almost insulting to us. It's like, okay, who the heck are these people? It's like, really? And one person in particular posed as a prospective buyer. It was the casino guy. And I figured out that was actually a quote unquote competitor. We don't have any competitors. We compete with ourselves. just to clarify, we don't care what other people are doing, but we're not going to let people take advantage of us that
Another
way.
purported provider of investigative services, we'll call them that.
Yeah, and but I think what they do is when you see these new sellers who are priced much higher than those who are like a level 2 with 100 plus reviews, or let's just say over 50 reviews. What they do is they are resellers of data. So they're wanting to grift and make 30 or 40 bucks. So what they do is they will create a bunch of pseudonyms or handles or fake accounts, and they'll try to scrape off of the hard work of others and then just try to repackage it beautifully. And this is why I think we're both reticent about showing a lot of our output, because it's like, I don't want these people stealing our templates and replicating what we've done. We've already seen that happen since we started in November, being sort of like the OG of like the video and the sample report. I've seen a lot of copycats using the Jane Doe report, and and I'm like, ooh, no, I would not produce that report. And I'm not trying to be critical, but it's like, please just do your due diligence, dearest
Absolutely.
Prospective clients and buyers out there.
And the price component works the other way as well. We've seen advertisements at a price that is so low that we know they're not really investigating anything. They're taking people's money and doing a very cursory, very just open, search of some kind.
Well,
and that's not fair to the client.
Well, so I think what they do is, and we've actually, just out of curiosity, we were like, what do these people finder PDF outputs look like? So if someone says, I want a comprehensive data report, and I want it on somebody in the United States, make sure it has the criminal history or all these different searches like court records, firearms, corporate documents. There are some decent people finder sites that sort of amalgamate like sort of the data from different sources, but it's not always accurate. And a lot of times it's commingled with other names similar and not always the most recent. And so they're like, sweet, I'll get a $24.95 monthly database and make a killing off of these reports at 25 or $30. And these aren't the tier 1 law enforcement grade database reports that cost us. I mean, those are pretty darn expensive. I mean, yeah, $12, $12, $15, $20 isn't going to cut it, per search. It's going to be like, that's the price at least of just one of the lower reports. That's not to include the rest.
The more comprehensive.
Right. And I'm getting tongue-tied. Yeah, here.
And what that does is the client is disappointed because they're not getting what they need.
Well, let me interject, Evan. The client might be happy because they haven't yet realized that if they were to look at that report, let's say like the People Finders, the truthfinder.com, the spokio.com, and these silly, goofy databases which don't really hold a candle to like a true law enforcement grade database of like real-time address, phone number information down to the month and year, the present month and year. Then they would say, oh, dang, that's, $30 or $25 I could have spent towards a real database report. And I think what people don't realize is that if they were to come to us and say, hey, I just want a report, I don't need the write-up, the dossier, I just want this, then we would say, okay, we could come down in price from, a 3-figure down to maybe a 2-figure, but they would be wowed, I think, by the difference.
And you're correct. They may not be disappointed at first. Typically they are. Eventually they realize when they come to use the report or when they need it to try to find someone, or they need it for process service or whatever, and they're completely unsuccessful at that, they may realize, or they may not, but they may realize that the report they got was not up to date. It was not the most current or the most complete information, and they regret having spent the small amount that they did, which ended up being just thrown away, basically.
And sometimes we feel sorry for people because, like, I know in one instance, someone said, yeah, we got this terrible report, I didn't know any better, but I want to use you guys. And they saw the difference and they said, wow, but we actually came down, a bit. This was earlier when we first started, and because we felt so sorry for them that not only did the platform let them down, but because they didn't do, their due diligence like they should have about vetting people, making the claims that they can do what they can do. But they were like, thank you so much. Because of this, I'm going to give you the rest of my, business, and yeah.
We often have repeat customers, I think, once they have seen
the difference.
What we can produce. When sometimes I like that they maybe used a cheaper one once, a year ago or something, because they will see the difference in our product, and we have a lot of repeat business.
And absolutely. And also another thing to look for when you're hiring a private investigator is some people who are just starting out. There may be some exceptional licensed private investigators. In fact, I do want to say this one thing, Evan.
Mm-hmm.
I did notice on this one platform that we're on that
Yeah.
a wonderful, talented man who is retired. I think he's retired from a sheriff's office in Texas. Just joined the platform and
Good.
seems like a great guy.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Haley, if he's ever in town, brother, Evan's gonna buy you a beer. So
Absolutely.
it's so refreshing when we see real, true private investigators joining. I feel like, and this is what I communicated to this one platform, the seller support or whatever, that if they had vetted everybody from the get-go, that you wouldn't have a $10 or $5 or $15. It would be like standard minimum price 75 or a 100 just to get your foot in the door kind of a thing. And I'm not saying that that's like a hallmark of excellence. It's just that most PIs require like a really expensive, like multi-$100 retainer to even get started. And people don't realize that, for $50, like if you're going to complain about not, the database report didn't show this one court case from 20 years ago, well, things that are expunged aren't going to be, present. But anyway, the one thing I do want to say is that there are, I would say 90% of investigators from what I've seen on one particular platform don't hold a license or do not put a license number visible for people to,
to see, to know, to have that transparency. Yeah.
Correct. However, there are about 10% of the sweeties who actually have worked in law enforcement, military, who have, or the legal industry, law,
Absolutely.
and that's another thing I want to say is that someone who has extensive, like let's say graduate or postgraduate research skills would make a great investigator, but they have experience that commands, credibility and such. But sometimes these very skilled professionals, see, I'm getting back to the point, Evan, don't have reviews. So they don't have reviews. This is when you start asking questions. Okay, I see that, your advertisement looks great, but where can I find more information about you? Do you have maybe even references or examples of the cases or projects you worked on that would show me or demonstrate or illustrate that you are capable of conducting very exhaustive investigative work? That's great. Now, with some of the reviews, we started back in November of 2021, and we were a hit. We did the first video. We had the first sample, report. I didn't see others doing that. Others just weren't as transparent as we were. But
they are now.
Well, they're copycats.
So,
a lot of
that's
them.
what I mean.
I'm saying, really, do you have to copy some of the language? But the thing is, you want to look at the reviews, and I find the reviews on platforms where a client must buy a product or service more credible because they're verified. And you want to look at the good, and you also want to see, this doesn't apply to us, but the bad, So if somebody gets a bad review, like, hey, nice person, but didn't get the right target, you want to see how that PI responds. And sometimes I see them getting very defensive. I've even seen the doxing of a last name.
Yeah.
Oh, that's gross.
And that's why it's important to see how they respond to reviews, because that tells you a lot about the person and about their business climate, their business approach.
Well, even intake, so if someone says okay, I'm going to throw out just a random example, didn't find the right person, I'm going to wonder, what happened in the initial, what do you call it, we do sometimes a courtesy check to see if we can first identify the right target, sometimes it costs, well, in most cases, it costs out of our own pocket, our time, and a database search fee, which we don't always recover to see if we can find the right target. And we'll go back and forth with these prospective clients saying, okay, well, we're identifying 5 people in this city, let's say Atlanta, Georgia. I'm just going to just randomly, by in the same age demographic, do any of these street addresses ring a bell? And they're going to say, yes, the third one, yes, that one, and boom. Then you can generate a comprehensive background report for this individual, and you know they're going to be happy because it's the right person, so.
A little bit of upfront work just to make sure that you can add value to their case. It goes a long way.
And tailoring it to their needs and their requests.
Every client that we work on, every case that we work on is separate, and it's tailored exactly to the needs of that individual. There's no canned responses to anything, the reports for anything.
Well, sometimes we tailor to people's needs, but they want everything for like $50.
Well,
it's
yeah.
like, oh my gosh, this is like $1,000 worth of work, and they don't understand. So it's kind of like the sacrifices we actually make in our, in present day, just to help out so many of these people voluntarily in many situations. But we're going to revise that, I think, in the next year. So you want to look at things like how people respond to reviews. And Evan, what else?
Well, I just want to make sure that everyone knows it's okay to ask questions. We're not going to be insulted by someone doing, in effect, their due diligence to make sure that we are a good fit for what they need. It's okay to ask questions, to ask about references, to ask about evidence of our experience. Again, it kind of goes back to transparency, but we are very open about those things and can give examples of anything they would like to give them the assurance that we know what we're doing.
Well, here's another thing, Evan. I do want to say this now. One thing I've noticed is that, we've provided evidence of past cases via some of the television docu-series like Oxygen and ID and Discovery Channel that featured some of the cases you worked on while you were an agent with the FBI. I've noticed that there are others trying to copycat that, but they're either paying someone to create like a sort of a glorified, bogus story about a case they worked on, but it's not a credible, legitimate source. It's like, yeah, you were employed at this place that does this type of thing. Like, you can pay somebody X amount of dollars to produce a story. You want to, if someone says, oh, I worked on this case, check out this article, you're going to say, well, how credible is the source? Is it from like a Newsweek or Time magazine or the Austin American Statesman or a local, newspaper, those kinds of things. It doesn't have to be a national or an international recognized source, but I'm looking for like a newspaper grade that is disseminated out to the masses as one that is credible, not like I will pay you to make a pretend story about me. And another thing I want to say is that, yes, we are happy to give out sample reports, but understand, and Evan is such a sweetheart. I can be kind of tough on people sometimes. The problem is, with so many copycats out there, we're more reticent in present day to just show people like an output of what someone asked us like 2 days ago. What's the difference between your mid and more complex? I'm like, if I give that to you, you just joined the platform this month. You're going to just try to steal that, intellectual property, that our sources and methods. I'm not going to give that to you. You got to pay the fee to understand where that is. And I even hate saying that, because then someone's going to want to just pay us just to sort of see. But it's so labor intensive, and so I guess, intellectually deep that people aren't going to want to replicate it because it would really require more hours than what they're willing to spend or that they're capable of doing. So,
And yeah, the latter being probably the most significant part of that is they could not even with time, recreate some of the things that we do.
no doubt, or be willing to.
Or be willing to, certainly.
Yeah, because it's like they just want to make a quick, cheap profit, off of the backs of others, or try. Yeah, but you never know. But and the thing is, I think that there is a lot of talent on that platform, but I think people need to be very cognizant about what to look for. Sellers need to be more empathetic to the fact that what they're doing might be hurting those who are starting on the platform, who are legitimately licensed, who have paid their dues in law enforcement, military, the research field, and have gone through the regulatory process of achieving something like this. I mean, it's to somebody like Evan and myself who have worked in law enforcement, like a private investigator, and I would be certain for the other former law enforcement officers. This almost seems like it's I don't want to call it a downgrade, but it's not like working for a law enforcement agency. You know what I mean? Like that is like, oh gosh, okay, I guess I'll just have a supplemental income as a PI, just doing a few things. You know what I mean? It's like for those who have worked, and that's not to undermine those in the field. It's just that when you've worked in a professional setting for decades, and
Under
then
different pressures and things that may not be as present now, but still the same skill sets and thoughts go into play.
yeah, but that experience easily warrants that licensure.
Absolutely.
So when some kid comes along who hasn't undergone a background check or paid the fees or the fines or the insurance and all those things that come into play, or had a serious audit, it's like a slap in the face to those who have worked in military and law enforcement and research, who said, I'm going to do it the right way, and because that matters to me, and I care about those who I serve as a private investigator. So, it's just, I don't know. I urge those legitimately licensed private investigators, reach out to us. I feel like we're a brotherhood or a sisterhood of legitimate PIs. I feel like we're like the 10% on that platform who are doing it the right way. And another thing I do want to say is, if you do find the first and last name of the person who is overseeing or the firm owner of a PI license, do your due diligence. See, what agency they had worked for, and also look for any potential risk, if they were ever in trouble in law enforcement and such. That's pretty easy to find, but a lot of people don't want to put their name out there for that fear. And I'm not talking about anybody in Texas who's on, or anybody really truly in the U.S. who I've identified as a PI.
And these platforms operate online, and of course that means in other countries as well as in all of the states, and so it is a little bit of a different universe out there.
No doubt.
With that range of possibilities, and that's why we work only on U.S. persons, and we don't get into what the laws or lack thereof are in other countries. But I'm getting off topic.
That's okay. That's all right.
So hopefully we have provided a good outline or thumbnail or sketch of what you should look for when hiring a private investigator. Hopefully you know a little bit more about what makes up a good investigation firm, and what do you have to have, what you need to insist upon with anybody doing work for you.
Absolutely. Always ask for the PI license number and any evidence. If they can't really readily provide one, always the experience. Ask why. Why can't you provide one? And if they do say that they're licensed, okay, what's your certificate number for the firm license? What's your PI pocket number? What's just the general number, so that you can make a few phone calls during a weekday and contact those governmental regulatory agencies and verify that over the phone or via email to an official governmental regulatory, contact, I should say.
Sure.
And it should be pretty self-explanatory. Anytime you're wanting to handle sensitive data, whether it's to send it off to a prospective PI, really, truly be careful and make sure that they are equipped with everything that we've discussed, the license.
Everything we've discussed, the skills, the experience, the licensure, they have to have all of those things.